Good evening, everybody. Howdy, howdy. Welcome to another show. This one's going to be a little bit different. So I do have a video that's kind of pulled up that we might get into a little bit of because I kind of suspected that this might uh, kind of tie into what my guest has in store tonight. So Michael had reached out to me yesterday, and it was kind of interesting. This was coincidental. Michael reached out to me and was like, "Hey," he started DMing me, and he's like, I think, I got some stuff here that shows where, Darth has been kind of quote mining Eugene Koonin. And lately I have been seeing Darth on a tear in some of his Discord chats talking about evolution and quote mining Eugene Koonin. And I'm pretty sure he's drawing like most of the wrong conclusions about this guy's stuff. And he just recently was in a long hangout. And my brother was in talking to him, and my brother actually he downloaded the video. I think it was from a YouTuber named JG, and it might have actually been one that he kind of co-streamed or mirrored from Godless Girl, because it almost looks like one of hers. Maybe not, but anyway. So I've got that pulled up just in case it actually ties into it. But anyway, welcome to everybody, and welcome to my guest Michael from the Canadian Atheist. I'm going to let him say hi, and then he's going to kind of introduce what he's got in store. So hey, Michael.
Hey, Jefferson, thanks so much for doing this again. Yeah, so we all know how much I love Ding Dong. And it's interesting, right? Of course. Now, I feel like there's so many prefaces we should add to this. Because, well, first of all, we should say hi to him because he'll watch this. So we should welcome him, because he can't get enough, right? But then the other thing we have to do is we're going to have to schedule some therapy for ourselves, and we're also going to have to see if there is a drug treatment that has been tested and is ready to be administered for Darth Dawkins derangement syndrome, because we clearly suffer from this, right?
Yeah.
Right. So, and leave it to someone who's totally not a narcissist to name a mental health disorder after themselves. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Like that would never happen, right? Okay. So, like you, I am just, if I do have a Clubhouse, YouTube, whatever addiction, it might at least partially be to our friend Tom Rabbit, right? His stuff is so funny, and he features our friend a lot, right? And so I've been watching a fair amount of his stuff, listening mostly, because so I'm one of the schleps that pays for YouTube Premium, so I can put it on, close my phone up, and it'll still play. I don't have to have it actively going on in the background, so I can put it on, and I can be going in the house doing things. I can be driving somewhere, and it doesn't interfere. So Google gets my $11 a month, and it's the best $11 I've ever spent, because I also don't have to put up with bullshit ads. But anyway, so listen to a bunch of stuff, and he seems to be on this tear, as you mentioned, lately, of quote mining. Now, yes, he's quote mining, and so I decided it would be fun to see how long it would take me to find out where it was coming from. Jefferson, the answer to that is about 7 minutes.
Okay. Now, I have a quick question for you
Sure.
before you go any further.
Yeah.
Oh, first, I should do this because it just got dropped here, and I want to highlight this. Thanks to Confessor. Thank you very much for the super chat. I said, Darth also quote mine Stephen J. Gould. The specific paper Prof. Dave went over. LOL. Not surprising. Yeah, I've heard him quote mine Gould before.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Max the Confessor, for that super chat. No, I wanted to ask you. So the one thing I was curious about, and I should have asked you after you DM'd me, because it didn't take me long to reach this conclusion, because there's two different ways of looking at this. If Darth is talking, the way Darth kind of presents this is that if you were to just kind of let it wash over you, when Darth talks about Eugene Koonin, it's almost as if Darth wants you to believe that Darth has read all of Eugene Koonin's research. and drawn these conclusions for himself. However, when I started looking into this issue that he seems to have with Koonin, and Koonin's bringing up these kinds of problems, what I started finding out was that Eugene Koonin is one of a handful of kind of heterodox people in the biological sciences who are, quote, mined by creationist sources. And so I was wondering, I'm like, did you happen to find, like, is Darth going to some, he's not the one doing the direct cherry picking. He's found a cherry picker and is just selecting that person's work.
Ding, ding, ding.
Okay.
And there'll be a prize later. Yes. So it is. So yes. Now it's funny, of course, because as we're all aware, Ding Dong is an expert at anything he chooses to talk about, right?
Of course.
He's a de facto expert at everything, right? Just ask him. He'll tell you. What are some of his favorite lines? This is something I've spent a great deal of time studying.
Yep.
Or, words to that effect, right?
You're in trouble because I've read a lot about this.
Right.
Yep.
Well, as it turns out, and like I said, ding, 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 you win the prize. And the prize this time is the incredibly knowledgeable think tank known as the Discovery Institute. So for anyone who's not aware, you can do a little Google search. And the Discovery Institute is they have lots of professionals. They have lots of doctors that are on their staff. Unfortunately, most of their doctors are dentists. So that's a problem. But anyway, let's not get into that. Yeah. So the answer is the Discovery Institute. And the funny thing is that this went down. Oh, let's just use ding dongisms for everything. This went down a semi-related rabbit trail, and this was actually something that was quoted by or mined, quote mined, by the Discovery Institute back in 2011, and it was from a paper. An excerpt from Dr. Eugene Koonin's book from 2007. So it's old, right? But it's still funny. So maybe it might be helpful to dive in a little bit into who Eugene Koonin is, because he's quite a brilliant man. So Dr. Eugene Koonin, let's see, he got his master's in science in 1978. He received his PhD in 1983 in molecular biology, which is just, I'm sure, something Ding Dong has picked up on the side just for fun.
Yeah, of course.
And
it took him a fraction of the time to pick up on it than it took Koonin.
Well, yeah, but probably due to the influence of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
So he's also, as anybody can tell, I'm a little bit salty tonight. And he's also the one thing that Ding Dong does get right is that he is an expert in the field. One of his fields of expertise is, and I had to look this up because I didn't know what the fuck it was, computational biophysics.
Yes.
I didn't know what that was.
I didn't either. The only thing I was able to figure out is it looks like Koonin is sort of like the name in it, and might be like one of the only names in it, to be fair.
Yeah.
But he's the guy.
Yeah. So in 2016, he was elected to the National Academy of Science. Ding Dong will probably be in there next year. He's been an adjunct professor in several places, including the Georgia Institute of Technology and Boston University, and written more than I have the time to even read. So. So I was able to find, so one of the places I found this, actually doing some digging, is this place called the Skeptical Zone. Now, the Skeptical Zone is a now defunct publication that was founded in 1908 by, what the hell's her name? Doesn't matter. It was founded in 1908 by one of the women who was a leader in the Church of Christ. And this was basically, it started out as a I think, an early version of what the Discovery Institute was. So kind of like, here's some stuff and here's some stuff that contradicts what it is, and we can't trust science and all this other stuff. And so got digging and got digging, got digging. And then that's how I got led to the Discovery Institute. And this letter that I found, the article that I found was written by a guy named Robert Crowther, Crowther, in 2007. And it is really, really, really interesting. So maybe we'll just get to the whole thing. Do you think there's interest in me just like it's not a very long blurb? Do you think there's interest in me just reading it? Or actually, this is probably the better part. Okay. So I'll just read this little blurb here. It says, lacking any substantive evidence to make their case, creationists offer a few selective quotes from real scientists, shock of all shock, to give their arguments authority. For example, noted National Institutes of Health evolutionary biologist Dr. Eugene V. Koonin was recently quoted by a program officer of leading intelligent design organization, the Discovery Institute, as saying that the modern synthesis of evolution has crumbled, apparently beyond repair. This implication was that Dr. Koonin would agree that there is scientific debate over evolution that deserves to be taught in the schools. However, when I, the author of this article, spoke to Dr. Koonin, he told me that this interpretation was simply wrong. Creationists, he said, delighted in claiming that whenever any aspect of quote unquote neo-Darwinian evolution is considered obsolete, that there's a problem. He said nothing could be further from the truth. Koonin explained that the crumbling, in his view, is a half a century old approach to the thinking about evolution. Modern evolutionary theory is a much broader and richer and ultimately more satisfactory explanation, including all the concepts, data, and ideas. Further, he quotes, evolution is alive and well, while creationist understanding of it is apparently stuck in the Eisenhower era.
Yeah, I do want to say, I think where you got that from is actually from an article that I found, because part of that quote is from an opinion piece that was written in the Christian Science Monitor, of all places.
Okay.
And so
all right.
that entry that you're reading was by Crowther, but that particular segment comes from an opinion piece called Creationists Have Gotten Clever, but There's Still No Debate Over Evolution. Now, of all places, this is in the Christian Science Monitor. And this was from, and it was from Stephen Newton. And I've actually
see that.
Yep.
Creationists Have Gotten Clever. Yep. Yeah. Same place.
Yep. And I'm going to share that now, I think. Let's see here. And for anybody that's interested in it. And this is from 2011. And yeah, as you go through the article, he starts getting into it. They kind of start off with Scopes trial, no debate on evolution. And when he gets into selective quotes from real scientists, that's the segment that Michael just read. What I think is interesting about this, I think he gets into... Nope, because it ends actually right after that. What's interesting about this take on it was that I found another article, and I wish I could get it in here. It was from The Guardian, because when I started looking up, I found this one, and I was like, well, that's an interesting take, especially coming from the Christian Science Monitor. And as I was looking at it, I was like, okay, so I found one from... I found Koonin's name connected to Massimo Pigliucci.
Ding Dong loves him.
Yeah, and Ding Dong's had a chance to talk to him. And it turns out that Pigliucci is actually, I think, coined the expression of the extended evolutionary synthesis. And there was this good article from The Guardian where it kind of went through sort of the acceptance of early Darwinian ideas, and then how they changed over time, and then sort of with Huxley, I think, was it Justin? I think that's not his name.
Thomas Huxley? T.H. Huxley?
No, it was his first name's with a J. Is it Justin Huxley? Anyway, he wrote a book about the modern synthesis, and that sort of emerged out of the 40s into the 50s, and it's still kind of around today. It's sort of this way of explaining evolution, most evolutionary stuff and things connected to it, through kind of the explanation that most of us get now, sort of the ideas about natural selection and things, nature selecting for things that are most beneficial for breeding and that kind of stuff, right? What some of these other guys have been coming along with and in dealing with, like Kunin and others and Pigliucci, is that there are certain things that they're running into that don't fit neatly into the modern synthesis and that constellation of things, and so they're trying to expand it, or they're trying to change it. And there's even some that are basically like, hey, we agree that maybe the modern synthesis doesn't hold up, but we don't think that it should be replaced with another kind of synthesis. We should just let it be kind of fragmented and you just let the chips fall where they may. What's fascinating about that article is it sort of gives this broad picture of like kind of where this has gone and where the strife is. But the one thing that most of these scientists are not having trouble with is the idea of evolution as in descent from a common ancestor with modification over time. That's not in dispute. And what you get from Darth Dawkins seems to be like, okay, well, you get two things from Darth that I think are basically built on fallacious, a lack of critical thinking. One is sort of this implication that, well, we have this really smart guy named Kunin who brings up A, B, and C, right? And so that blows this up. So consensus, there's this implication I get from Darth as if like, well, this guy disagrees and he's really smart, therefore there's no consensus, right? Darth hasn't explicitly stated it, but it's sort of banking on the fact, well, if it's not unanimous, then there's no consensus, right? You'd have to be kind of ignorant to think like, okay, there's a guy out there who is a scientist, a man or a woman, very smart, who are thinking differently about this thing. Just because they disagree with aspects of a consensus theory, or maybe even the bulk of it, or the way it's being presented to lay people or whatever, doesn't necessarily mean you have to throw the whole thing away. Right. And when you hear Darth talk about it, it's almost if you do. And then on top of it, the conclusions that he's drawing about it have nothing to do with it. It's as if he's like, okay, well, not only is there no consensus, but this guy's basically like throwing a rod in the spokes of the wheel and bringing this whole thing crashing to a halt. So take that, naturalists. And it's like, that's not what these people are doing. They're trying to bring in theories like plasticity and other, theories about biological adaptation and evolution that, the old kind of modern synthesis hasn't really made room for yet. So.
Yeah, and I think some people forget, that, Darwin was over 150 years ago, right? Like, I mean, think of all the things we didn't know, science related 150 years ago. There's lots of stuff, right? Look, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, Darwin didn't even know what DNA was. Like, we didn't even know what DNA was 150 years ago. So, yeah. I mean, there's so much stuff. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Like, I have a fridge magnet downstairs that says 9 out of 10 scientists think the 10th scientist is an idiot. Like, I think the last statistic that I saw was something like 93% of the National Academy of Science, members of the National Academy of Science, accept evolution as the best explanation for the biodiversity that we see on Earth, right? And Aaron Ra quotes this in his book Foundational Falsehoods. He said, if gold, if something like if silver, like 99 and 44th, percent is considered, pure in the silver trade, then we're approaching those same levels when it comes to, the consensus of all scientists, because it's not just biologists, right? But every single solitary branch of science, they all converge on the same conclusions, right?
Yeah.
It's biology, it's chemistry, it's botany, it's geology, it's all of them. They all come independently to the same conclusions, and they all get their heads together like, oh yeah, this is it, right? And what's really funny is I've gotten to the point now where if a creationist wants to argue evolution with me, I tell them to go talk to a scientist, right? Because I'm in the soft sciences, right? I'm in social work. I don't deal with the hard sciences. But what I'll say typically is, my line is kind of, look, if you think you've got what it takes to bring down what is the most well-established theory in all of science, fill your boots. But just get ready to become so famous and pretty much overnight that it's going to make your head spin.
Right.
You know, because we know more about evolution than we know about gravity. Right? Like there is no longer any debate. There are things that we're learning all the time, right? I mean, but there's no longer a question as to whether or not evolution is a thing, and it's still happening now. There's just no more question, regardless of what people like Ding Dong or Kirk Cameron might think about it.
Yeah, and I like Floyd FP had mentioned. He's like, well, I think it's kind of weird that he's getting into this because he used to. One of Darth's old usernames used to be Evolution False. So the idea that he's kind of getting into these conversations again seems kind of weird when he kind of moved away from that. And I don't know if like maybe early on he was sort of like dividing his time equally between Precept and evolution, or if just if he gets a little tired of one, he decides to shift to the other. I don't know, but
this is just a new bone, right? Because he wasn't talking about this 6 months ago. Right? So this is new. Somebody pointed this out to him. So he read a page and a half on the Discovery Institute's website and said, oh, well, ding, ding, I've got a new argument, right? He didn't read all of Kunin's research, and fuck, neither have I, right? I don't have time for that kind of shit. And I probably wouldn't understand it even if I didn't read it. Like, let's be honest. Like, I'm going to pick up a paper on computational biophysics and understand it? No, right? That's not a thing that's going to happen. But Ding Dong, reads this thing. It's ICR. He's in his echo chamber. It already props up what he happens to believe. And so, it's scripture.
There is another big one on this, because I've seen, Gutsick Gibbon has done videos about, she's done videos about Stephen Meyer, right? And he works for Discovery Institute, I think, and he has in joint. There's a video, and when I pulled it up, he quotes Eugene Koonin in a video that he did for PragerU. And I would bet money that Darth Dawkins is a fan and at the very least a casual viewer of PragerU's quote unquote educational videos. So yeah, I mean, this doesn't strike me as being anything. I mean, I think it's interesting that Darth usually comes across as being knowledgeable about this kind of stuff when all he's doing is just sort of memorizing these talking points from the position of the positions of these people who are generating these apologetics. I've said this before. What bothers me about this is that the whole goal is, as Christians, what we'll do is we will try to create skepticism about evolution, and this will shake the faith of the quote unquote evolutionists. And it's like, okay, and then what?
Yeah.
When you have sullied the reputation of our prophet Darwin, I will convert to your religion. And like, what exactly do you think you're doing here, right? Like, I mean, it's pretty. It's embarrassing to think that this is what they're doing, but I really do think that that's part of like. And I remember, when I was a young person in church, and we would talk about this kind of stuff because I was in a conservative church that like, oh, they're teaching our kids evolution in the classrooms. They would talk about these kind of tactics, and this is exactly how they would say it. They would say the quiet parts out loud to a congregation of Christians because it was like, well, we need to make sure that these people just doubt this stuff. That was the apologetic, right? Just make them doubt the scientific. It's not really scientific consensus. And one of my favorites was, back then, like, well, how can it be scientific consensus if there are scientists out there that disagree? Like, I mean, they were blatantly misrepresenting consensus. Right. The whole thing was like, oh, if we keep doing this, we'll keep Christian believers on the back foot in order to reaffirm their faith. And then they can go out and use this with people who bring this stuff up. Like, hey, I don't, maybe I'd be inclined to go to church if they weren't trying to peddle this young earth creationist and anti-evolution stuff. And then they're armed with that. Well, they have to be unanimous in order for it to be consent. It's just like, all you managed to do is enable your parishioners to sound like bigger bubbas than they were when they came in. So
and what's funny is that and what you said, doesn't follow just because this, right? If what was one of the lines, right? Darwin talked about himself when he was asked, what would it take to disprove my theory, and he kind of jokingly said, fossilized rabbits in the Precambrian. Well, if we found a fossilized rabbit in the Precambrian, it wouldn't follow that Christianity is true. right? All we need to do is read the Bible to know that that's just totally made up bullshit. Like,
Right.
sorry, anybody who's watching this, the Christian God doesn't exist, friends. It just doesn't. And you don't need to do anything more than read the Bible to find that out. Um, and so it's yeah, but yeah, like it's like sowing the seeds of mistrust, and you can't trust these guys. You get a bunch of these scientists together, and they can't agree on something, and no, there might be some fine points that they disagree on, but the broader from that article, the broader consensus is still this is a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Previous no damage. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you, Stephen. I would agree with you.
And yeah, this Cascade writes, "All of this was exposed in the Kitzmiller v. Dover trial." Yeah, which is something I've been meaning to go back to and take a look at, because that was the one where I think there was the judge's decision was basically kind of a legal declaration that intelligent design is a religious tenet, right? It's a religious belief,
Yeah.
and they were trying to, I mean, because a lot of these things have been sort of disguised in this, like, well, hey, what we're not trying to get you to teach kids in public schools that young Earth creationism is a fact. What we want you to teach them is that evolution, that there's scientific evidence that debunks evolution, and it's like that's not real either, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just a weird way of kind of flipping it around. Like the idea behind is, well, kids, you can't trust the theory of evolution. It's like, yeah, you kind of can. Like if you were going to get into higher level mathematics or something, like if you get into something like a history of science, like a history of scientific thinking or a philosophy of science class, or you do some kind of summary thing where they're talking about the progression of scientific ideas and theories and trends and stuff like that, you'll get into this sort of explanation of like Darwinianism to the modern synthesis to now this emergence of sort of like these guys like Micheal are doing this extended synthesis kind of stuff. And then you could kind of get into the weeds of that. But, for most people who are lay people, they're not going to get into that in terms of trying to explain to lay people or trying to explain to beginning, biology students the kind of idea behind natural selection is kind of helpful in trying to get your head set into the game. The interesting thing is that based on stuff that I've read about Piliuc's views on it, some of the stuff that Kunin brings up, and some others that have kind of, are kind of looking at finding ways of either revising or dismantling the modern synthesis in exchange for something new, there's an implication built into some of this new way of thinking that I thought was interesting, because the Guardian kind of laid this out. The idea of natural selection is a little bit more comforting, because you can kind of look at it as being a kind of rational, I mean, you don't want to reify it, but it's almost like a rational conclusion. Like nature is going to work in a way that is constantly trying to improve itself for the purposes of reproduction, right? And that gives you some way of making sense of what could possibly be very chaotic, what's seemingly very chaotic and very senseless, and some of the new theories and things that they're trying to build into. The implications are, nope, it's even more chaotic, more senseless, and even more random happenstance than even that. Like you can just chuck any sense of security you get with natural selection right on out the window. So the idea that like that somebody like Darth is like, hey, let's bring Eugene Kunin's views in here. Yeah, let's do that. Let's bring that in there and inject even more randomness into the equation, because that's what Kunin brings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In fact, I think he's got a book called The Logic of Chance.
That's the one that's the one Ding Dong quotes all the time. The logic of chance.
That's where the quotes are coming from. Okay.
Yeah. That's what he quotes all the time. And it's funny because as he does it, he says, he will typically ask, and we alluded to this before, like he'll ask the people that he's speaking with if they've ever heard of Eugene Kunin, right? And I wasn't familiar. Like, full disclosure, I wasn't familiar either. But and then when they say no, he's like, oh, well, if you knew anything, you'd know who Eugene Kunin is, because he's this. And he goes on to talk about what an expert this man is. And then he gives like the iceberg of definition of conclusions, right? You only see 10% of it. He talks about the little bit, but you don't see the mountain, that's underneath that, right?
Right.
And that's what's so That's what's so dishonest about this tactic. And so that is what makes our friend so dishonest in what he's doing.
Yeah, because he thinks he's making like all the best, he's drawing all the best conclusions for it. And it's like, I really don't think that you are. Right. And he never does bother to bring up the fact that, like, Coonan rejects and resents being quoted by places like the Discovery Institute because they're taking him out of context and they're ignoring the implications of his broader work.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a look at a snippet of video from?
Absolutely, yeah. But in response to the messages popped up there from Swifter, what are the chances he's read it? Fucking 0.0. I don't think
Yeah,
he's done anything more than look at what was posted on Discovery Institute. And you know what? I haven't read the book either.
sure.
And it's interesting. I remember so um like we've had Lawrence Krauss on the podcast. I've spoken to him a bunch of times, and uh, I he's been implicated in some less than wonderful things, but I've always tried to separate like his work, like the work from the individual. The same as like people have talked about things that Richard Dawkins has done and said that have been problematic recently, right?
Right.
Um, Not wonderful, right? Not wonderful. But even if these people, like the couple of people that I mentioned, even if they turned out to be the most vile human beings on the planet, it wouldn't invalidate the science that they've done. And so, but anyway, to say all that to say, I read before having my second conversation with Lawrence Krauss, I read um, so the first talk I had with him was about a universe from nothing, which I mostly didn't understand. And the second talk I had with him was on greatest story ever told so far, which I also mostly didn't understand. Which is it's all on, for anyone who's not aware, it's basically the second book is all on particle physics. Um, it damn near broke me. Um, it damn near broke me. Just because, like, again, soft science guy, right? So I'm reading this stuff and I'm having to like read it with a dictionary and a thesaurus. Um, and I'm not ashamed to admit that book was way fucking over my head. And I remember when I asked him about it during an interview that we did, and he said, I said, who should be reading this book? And he said, well, basically, people who are fans of science. He said, but if you don't have an interest in particle physics, I'm not sure why you would read it. Like he was very straightforward in it, right? Like he's like, this is not a book for everybody.
Sure.
Um, and so it's so very long drawn out way of saying Swifter, there's no fucking chance you read that book.
What I'll do is I'll pull this one up. Let's get us down here in the corner. Let me expand that. So this was shared by this portion of the video. It's about an hour and 17 minutes, and I'm going to play this one. My brother is actually trying to break into the conversation. He's the one that snipped this and shared it with me. So I was going to go over this, and he's already asking questions, but Darth is trying to get into some of his stuff. So we'll play a little bit of this. I don't think my brother's in here for very long. I think it might be a total of like 2 to 3 minutes before Darth cuts him. But I heard a little bit about this yesterday when I spoke with him, and I don't know how long you've been talking about this because this video is damn near 2.5 hours long, and
Wow.
when it opens up at the beginning, he's talking to, I think, like a Muslim apologist. So he's on that totally different topic. So
Yeah,
I don't know at this point in the video how long he's been talking about the evolution thing, but
yeah, because I know that like Daz and Gigi and other people will sometimes just like they'll just start a stream and they'll mirror whatever's going on and
yeah,
they'll just let it roll
yep,
because so much of it it's like it really is in a lot of ways it's like that fucking train wreck that you can't look away from,
yeah,
right?
and,
It's
and
like,
what I
oh, I can't watch, show me more. It's terrible. It's
yeah,
terrible.
and he actually somebody said this here. Let's see. Yeah, from Swifter. I've asked Darth multiple times to lay out the argument for the improbability of a bio/Evo, and he does nothing more than give the basic argument of improbability, which is easily debunked. And
Yeah.
that seems to be the problem, because like usually he'll start getting, when he starts getting into specifics and somebody raises a question, like, okay, like he'll try to like raise an issue, and I think that's what happens here. My brother's kind of like, okay, what does that have to do with like kind of negating either the possibility or the likelihood of evolution? And it seems like he, like what I'm guessing he's going to do here is then retreat back into, what are the odds that life formed the way that it has? Right.
Yeah. Well,
That's and yeah.
we should make this a drinking game or something. And I think that I'd be willing to bet that at some point during this conversation, we hear the following quote, I'd be happy to answer that question, but first, unquote. Because that's his go-to, right? You can probably, I think the entirety of the internet could count on one hand the amount of questions he's ever answered.
Yeah, exactly. Also, we got a comment here from Digital Hammurabi. Jefferson Spatchcock, you and Micheal, quote unquote, are totally unable to measure progressive Kantian metaphysics in entreaties to supplement necessary ultimacy. Atheists just suppress truth and unrighteousness. I think that means we're both canceled, Micheal. So
pretty much. I love, first of all, hello, Josh. Love you, Ben. And say hi to Megan and everybody else. Yeah, it's I've said this a lot. When I don't think there's anything less convincing. And of course, Josh is just being he's just being a contrarian about this and funny about it. And it always makes me laugh. But I don't know that I've ever heard anything more or less convincing than Romans 1 to an atheist. Like, come on, we already, of course we already know, right? We're just suppressing the truth in our righteousness. Like, of course.
which actually gets me into there's going to be a video that I'm going to be taking a look at, which is a nice breakdown of how Romans 1 is treated by preceptors versus how it's treated by apologists in sort of the classical or the evidentialist school of thought. And I'm going to get into that because the way that I think the preceptors treat that, and the way a lot of these people that kind of orbit around Darth and others in that kind of preceptor camp, at least the preceptor enthusiasts in social media, Christian social media, are getting that really wrong. And I've long suspected it, and of all places, the one source that kind of reaffirmed like 2 or 3 points I've been making for a long time about Darth specifically, and about some of these kinds of fundamentalist Christian takes on Bible quotes, was of all things a guy that is a seminary instructor from a seminary in the Deep South, of all places. He's like, yeah, this isn't what you think it is. It's not. Yeah, that's not good.
Oh, what does he know?
Right. I mean, yeah, he could just be wrong. Yeah, he's got a master, he's got a doctorate in like, what was it, theology, I think, from his seminary, and he has a PhD in philosophy. But he's an idiot. He can't be right.
Yeah. Well, look at our friend in the audience right now, Josh. Right? Like, what can he possibly know? Right.
Well, he went to a school called Johns Hopkins. I've never heard. That sounds like a made up name for a school. I mean, how many Johns do you need? I mean, Johns Hopkins, that's clearly made up. There's no such place.
It's like John. That's John Hancock's brother, probably.
The only time I see Johns used as plurals when they're referring to the customers of prostitutes, sir. Clearly, that's just a.
Megan won't like that.
I'll never be welcome in the state of Maryland after this. All right. So yeah, let me play this a little bit, and we'll see kind of what Ding Dong gets up to here.
Okay, so you do believe in evolution.
Yes.
Yeah, and you do. So you do believe in evolution. Now, what is the evidentiary support that happened?
Okay. Well,
just say God made it that way.
The only
I'm going to start. Hold on a second. Hold on. I'm going to start server muting people if you heckle. I want everybody to mute your microphone except the doctor professor. And if I see any open mics, I'm going to server mute everybody who has an open mic.
Server mute.
Get Boomer, because I think trying to troll earlier.
Okay, so the way that we consider proof as of now is our taxonomic classifications, which basically we
No, that's
assign
not
a
proof.
huge.
That's not proof
I
of
have to finish my
evolution. That's just
statement.
okay.
And which we basically have countless traits in which we measure on any individual species on the planet, including.
I'm still waiting for you to give me a very
this
clear
is a very
and
complicated
listen.
question.
No, it's not very complicated. I want you to tell me. No, I want you to give me. Look, I've been studying evolution for years. Okay,
Jefferson,
I want you
pause
to
for a
give me
second.
a very succinct explanation. What is your strongest evidentiary support of Darwinian evolution? What is it?
Okay, well, it would be if you take the entire DNA code.
I think this is already kind of a trap, right? Because he's not asking about sort of like the theory of evolution. He's got it couched as Darwinian evolution.
Well, it's not even so much
Wait,
that, but it was like, this doctor professor guy who I've never seen before, I don't think. He said, I'm trying to lay this out. It's very complicated. He says, it's not complicated. No, there's nothing complicated about evolution.
nothing at all. No, there's nothing complicated about. Yeah, no, I mean it's easy. God whipped everything up like he was baking a quick bread. Yeah, this whole thing is just.
It just
I mean,
boils down to Dirt Man and Rib Woman. Full stop.
yeah, kind of. And if you're one of these guys, this is where things. When I was talking to my brother about this yesterday, we kind of got off into where some of the theological entailments go with this. And I have always wondered about this because Darth is one of these guys that doesn't just kind of throw out this idea that a God is necessary to initiate the reality that we're in. Darth will frequently use language that makes it clear that he believes that the maintenance of this realm, of this reality, requires the constant power and energy of that same deity. And he's even said in the past, I don't think he's really been harping on this recently, but he said in the past that without the constant influx of this person's energy and his the imposition of his will to create order, then everything would just dissolve into unintelligible chaos, right? Which is a really remarkable view because that doesn't actually hold up with the view that he actually claims to have. His idea is that everything is ontologically dependent upon the existence of this God, which means it wouldn't necessarily have to inject its energy into it, right? The notion that the reality slips into chaos the minute this thing withdraws some of its imposition of will in order to maintain order means that that reality created by that deity is intrinsically chaotic, which would mean that is a property that's sort of reflected in the God that made it. And so, in a way, it's like it's almost like Darth is trying to like meld two different ideas about kind of a theological not a cosmology, but kind of a reality. There's the one where there is a reality, a realm of chaos, and from this chaos, there is a deity like Yahweh or something, or Marduk or whatever, that establishes order and control over it and and makes it so, right? And allegiance and with Him is what gives you benefits and blessings. And if that God withdraws His hand of protection from you, then He allows the powers of chaos and darkness and things like that to come flying in at you, and then you're basically no longer protected. The evil spirits get you. But Darth then also will work with these kinds of theories where he's talking about God as an ontological necessity, which means if this God is good and orderly and all these kinds of things, that kind of mentality that this God is superimposing his will and imposing order on an otherwise chaotic realm doesn't hold up. That's a contradiction.
Yeah. See, I'm way more. Maybe I'm just more petty than that. What my takeaway from that was galactic janitor.
Kind of, yeah. It would be like Darth wouldn't admit to that because then it would sound like the chaos realm is something to which his God is in a way contingent upon, right? Everything kind of comes from some primordial ooze or darkness or void or, whatever. Everything has a common origin point, but this being has this power and goodness and strength, and he's able to impose order in what is otherwise this chaotic, insanity. That's kind of an old school, like ancient Near Eastern take on deities. And sort of chaos and order versus or chaos versus order, goodness versus evil, light versus darkness, growth versus death. The idea that that he's then trying to get into these other things like, no, it's absolutely necessary. Order, it's not, order isn't what doesn't presuppose a God. It's reality itself. And he's not always real consistent about this. So that I don't know why more people don't actually get him on this, why they don't ask him like, wait, you think that like, if this God, like, do you think that God can withdraw some of his management from the world just a little bit to allow it to turn into like a hellscape? Do you think that God can do that? My guess is that Darth would have to admit that he does kind of believe that.
It's interesting. I wonder if part of it is almost like a veiled argument against something like deism, right? Because deism, the idea that you just kind of poof and then he's off, shitting in the corner somewhere.
Right.
If what Ding Dong is saying is true, and there has to be this kind of constant intervention, this constant puppeteering, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
That would, I think, eliminate the possibility in his mind of a deistic creator that just kind of created everything and doesn't care about us anymore, just kind of went off to play tiddlywinks.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a great point. And that sort of seems to be the thing. So if somebody like you came along and like, well, what difference does it make if God is this great engineer? He creates reality like a fine watch, winds it up, and lets it go. He can leave. He can grab a newspaper and go to the bathroom. He can just check out for a few millennia and just let this thing tick out the way he's got it. He knows everything that was, will be, and ever could have been. So there you go. It's all said. But if, like you said, well, that means a deistic God is possible. So one can just set it in motion, then just piss off and be a negligent, kind of a negligent landlord. Well, in his case, like, no. It's absolutely necessary for him to be there constantly sort of supervising the direction of everything. But he doesn't seem to understand that the theological implications of that are twofold. One, if that God, the first complaint that I've made in other videos is that if that God is actively making our reality in the here and now what it is, that God is even more on the hook for all the bad things that happen than previously thought. And then the second one would be that the sort of implication behind this, the idea behind this, is that God is necessary. The imposition of his will is necessary all the time in order to keep this from flying off the rails and flying into oblivion, which is neat because it does what you said. It sort of short circuits this attempt to say God could just create this perfect thing and then check out for a while. Sure. But it also means that what he created is essentially will spin out of control unless he's there to supervise it, which says something about the properties of that God. He has the capacity to create something that without his constant babysitting will become dangerously self-destructive. To me, that's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's see here.
And then look at the difference between species on the planet. You'll see variation in the percentage in which it differs. You'll see a huge chunk in which is exactly the same, and it's a long number.
That's simply false.
That is not false. That is not
what
false.
You just said. What you said when you say there's a huge chunk that is exactly the same, that's even ridiculous, because even when you compare chimp DNA and human DNA, okay, first of all, how much of chimp DNA and human DNA do you think they've compared?
I think it's like 90%, 90 or 95,
okay.
Something like that.
Is that true?
Yeah, we can measure that. We can
take the
DNA out of a chimp and a human.
Okay, now I'm going to explain to you why that's categorically false.
Okay.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Yeah, I will go for it. And then you're going to have egg on your face, okay? Out of the 2 to 3 billion base pairs, what percentage of those 2 to 3 billion base pairs codes for proteins?
What?
What does this have to do with?
Out of the 2 to 3 billion base pairs.
What does this have to do with it? I mean, I could have swore that what he was saying, that the guy was false about the chimp to human DNA similarity. Yeah. And now he's asking about what codes for, okay.
The human genome.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that, Jefferson, pause for a second. The funny thing about that is that he is now doing, and this is why one of the things I'll say sometimes about Ding Dong is, methinks methinks he doth project too much, is he will jump on someone. He will lose his ever-loving fucking mind if someone starts to talk about something that isn't precisely laser fucking pointed at what he wants to talk about. What does he say? You're going down a semi-related rabbit trail. What's he doing now? Going down a semi-related rabbit trail.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Percentage of it codes for proteins?
I don't know what that question means.
Oh yeah, because you're speaking out of ignorance, sir. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Now,
okay.
did they
What does that mean?
did they compare the entire genome of the chimp genome against the human genome?
Okay, so you got to understand that it's very easy to sequence a genome.
Okay, sir. Okay, stop bullshitting. I asked you a direct question. Did they compare the entire chimp? No, they did not.
We can translate the entire DNA of a chimp into a number.
You know what? You know something? I'm really getting irritated.
Yeah, you are getting irritated.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a slip.
Yeah.
I'm really getting irritating. No, I mean,
Dr. Freud.
If I was gonna disagree, like you're not getting.
Yeah.
You started that way, and you really stayed consistently irritating. That's one good thing about Darth Dawkins. He's consistently annoying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now listen carefully. They only
I don't need to
compared. Okay, if you ever talk, only compare. You told me that they compared almost the entire human genome against the chimp genome. Do you remember when you said that?
Yes, I meant it.
Okay, well you're categorically wrong. They only compared the less than 2% of the human genome, which code for proteins, against the less than 2% of the protein coding regions in the chimp genome. So the 98% of human and chimp genome, they did not compare at all.
What is he talking about?
No, I think he's actually I remember reading something about this. I think he's actually right, but he's not right for the reason he thinks he's right. If memory serves, and I could be wrong about this, but we share something like 98.6% of our DNA, like with chimpanzees. There's a very small percentage we're different, right? That two or so percent is what they analyzed because they basically said, look, this is the same, so we're not going to worry too much about that. We're just going to look at where it's different and focus on where it's different.
So yeah, I think that Grey Knight's. I think he's trying to point this out here. The 98.8% is whole genome to whole genome comparison. He's simply wrong about this. My understanding is that when we compare protein coding sections only, that percentage drops.
Okay, this guy you probably know Grey Knight. You probably know way more about than I do, so I'll just defer to what you probably know better than I do.
Yeah, and he says right that 2% still constitutes millions of changes. Nick posts this. He's referring to this. Let's see here. Okay. A cis-acting structural variation at the ZNF558 locus controls a gene regulatory network in human brain development. Cell stem cell. All right. Okay, that's very technical. Okay.
Which means Jefferson, you probably can understand it, but I'm sure Ding Dong can.
Right. Yeah, he probably helped write it. Yeah, the 99% number only comes from protein coding regions. It drops slightly when other regions factored in, but it doesn't matter either way. The percentage is still highest between chimps and humans. Yeah, it just seems kind of weird. Like Darth brings this up, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to own this guy on this kind of thing." It's like, okay, well, I mean, yeah, I'm sure that this percentage can be presented in a different way. It doesn't change the fact that we share an enormous amount in common with these other primates, like chimps and bonobos.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because I'm reminded of one of the chapters in the God Delusion. I think the chapter is called "Dogs, Cows, and Cabbages," um, where Dawkins talks about the massive similarities we have with these organisms, like, and these other things that aren't even remotely like us, right? Um, so my first thought is who cares? Like, doesn't matter.
Yeah. Let me push this forward. I thought this was where my brother was going to actually be in, and he pops up here at, I think, around the 150. Let's see here. Let's take this back to about here. I think this is where he shows up. I kind of promised him I would. Let's see here. Let's see what he's talking about.
But you see, and you ask yourself, well, why do the evolutionists still believe it? Because they don't want to believe in design. They don't want to believe in creationism.
But you can still hold the design and still hold that the design allows for change probabilistically.
No, sir. That you don't know what you're talking about.
The design of blackjack. The design of blackjack allows for probability, even though the game is designed around probability.
You're not understanding this at all. Okay, the probabilities that we're talking about, you're totally clueless at this point. Do you know what the odds are of mutations producing one coding sequence for one amino acid to represent a link in a protein chain?
Okay, so he's automatically like he's this has been brought up, but like if my brother is in there asking him like, look, it could have been designed to do this. The fact that he's going back to what are the odds that this happened? My brother's conceded the notion, like, let's think about this. You'd still have evolution you could still have something that was quote unquote designed, and it factors in for probabilistic changes that occur randomly throughout these various life forms. And now Darth is trying to go back to some kind of the improbability of abiogenesis thing.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you go back to the improbability of stuff like that, one of my favorite things that I'll reference is when Christopher Hitchens was having a discussion with William Lane Craig, and he talked about, because Craig was talking about the improbability of this, and he kind of made a joke of it. He said, that scientists have agreed that this stuff is so improbable. If it did happen, it would literally be a miracle. They did this at Biola University, which of course is a religious school, which got big chuckles and big applause and stuff like that. And when Hitchens kind of answered the question, he just said one thing. He said, so all you've demonstrated is that life is very rare. Like, so what? Life is rare. It doesn't, like, the probability is 1-to-1. We're fucking here talking about it. It happened, right? It doesn't matter how improbable it was. I think that's largely irrelevant. We know it wasn't creation. We know that.
Yeah, and I think in some of the cases like this appeal to this kind of thing, like, well, what would it have taken in order for this stuff to just to incidentally occur? Like, well, there's almost no way of knowing.
Yeah.
Because we can't duplicate we don't even know the exact conditions of
prebiotic. Yeah, prebiotic. We have no idea what prebiotic Earth was like.
Yeah,
zero.
Like, I mean, we can make guesses. They can make some assumptions. To draw some hypotheses about what it might have been like. But yeah, as far as like trying to this idea of trying to calculate it. Now, I mean, yeah, it's. I know that there's statisticians, and mathematicians that speculate on this. It sounds like it would be kind of hard, incidentally, to have it occur. But okay,
yeah,
but I still just think it's so odd that Darth is retreating back to this kind of thing. Like, what are the odds? When my brother has conceded, like, no, the odds would be this God made it, but he made it to occur this way. Then what are the odds?
Well, yeah, Dawkins talks about this in the God Delusion as well. He kind of uses the analogy of a very complex locking mechanism. He said, if you had to figure out the combination of this very complex locking mechanism all at once, the chances of it happening would be so unbelievably small that you might say it was tantamount to impossible. But if you look at it like when a thief or a locksmith is trying to pick a combination lock, right? They are able to listen, and when they get one little clink, they know that that's correct, right? And they can move on slowly but surely, incrementally improving until eventually, this very complex lock is opened up, rather than rolling, like rather than figuring out all at once, or rolling, 100 six-sided dice and them all coming up ones, or all coming up twos, threes, fours, fives, or sixes, right? Yes, that's very improbable, but the steps along the way, because we don't know what prebiotic Earth was like, it could have been very inhospitable, and then slowly changed a little bit, just to the point where it happened.
Right. Yeah. Hogtie writes, yeah, sure, it's unbelievably unlikely that a pool of amino acids would randomly bump into each other and form hemoglobin, but so what?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that to me is the real problem, I think, when these guys try to get into this, because at this point, like Darth was talking about, if Darth wants to get into things like the fossil record or things like this, he wants into pointing out these kinds of issues, and then he'll start kind of like cherry picking and quote mining different scientists from different fields on these kinds of difficulties and disagreements that they have about this stuff, and then sort of draw this thing like, aha, evolution isn't mapped out entirely. It doesn't make sense. These people don't all agree on it. It's like, okay, from that, if one were to extrapolate from these different experts' disagreements on this, that we throw out the baby with the bathwater, that's not critical thinking. That's not a rational conclusion to make. And Darth seems to be really heavily leaning into this. Like, the rational thing for you to do is to abandon all of this, because I can point to very smart people. And I think he thinks he's being charitable by describing these atheists. He at one point, I think he even called Coonan a renowned atheist in one of his discussions, which I don't think Coonan's renowned for his atheism. But trying to say like, oh, well, here we are. Here's somebody that I wouldn't agree with on anything, and he seems to disagree with some of these implications involved in Darwinian evolution. Like, okay, but he's not trafficking in the kind of evolution that Prager University and the Discovery Institute are actively trying to debunk. The version of a lot of the concepts and things that they're still obsessed over trying to debunk are, like was mentioned in that opinion piece, that they're looking at that from the Eisenhower era. They're looking at the early modern synthesis kinds of layman explanations for explaining this kind of stuff, and saying, aha, it's not complete here. Ha, it's not complete there. Ha, it's not complete there. Like, it wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like, there's a difference between this. Like, you're going to get a different explanation depending on how deep you go. Anyway, let's play this out, because I don't think we're long into this before my brother gets kicked.
It's 1 in 20.
Well, he's a known troll. So.
The second one followed by the first is 1 in 400. The third one followed by the first two is 1 in 8,000. Let me listen. Listen to me. No, it's 1 in 20 times 1 in 20 is 1 in 400, sir.
Well, earlier I think you said 1 in 40, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
No, I didn't. I said 1 in 20.
No, but you went 1 in 20, and then went to 1 in 40, and then went went exponentially.
No, it's 1 in 400.
Okay, that's fine. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You still have the probability, because you have the 1. But again,
you're not understanding. Okay, sir. This makes me just want to throw up when people like you who are so ignorant. You don't know what you're talking about here. Okay, the issue is not on a piece of paper. We're talking. Okay. I'm trying to explain something to you, sir. Do you want to learn?
Well,
I think that this is a funny technique, separate from the topic, but you're losing out on an opportunity to learn from Darth Big Brain Dawkins here. How many times has Darth squandered an opportunity to learn from Lawrence Krauss, Massimo Pigliucci et al.? But it's worth excoriating somebody like my brother, like, oh, you are squandering an opportunity to bask in the presence of my great knowledge, sir.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's like basically bow down as I condescend to speak to you.
Yeah. And yeah, he actually, like AJ had written, let's see here. Oh, it's blacking it out for me. If you're going to cherry pick, you might as well throw in an argument from embellished authority while you're at it. Yeah. He said 1 out of 20, 1 in 20, and then 1 in 40. It's on the tape. I'll take your word for that. Let's see.
But here's my issue.
Sir, let me ask you this question. Why does Dr. Eugene Koonin, a world-renowned microbiologist and expert on evolutionary biology, when he surveys the mathematical improbability of mutations producing the entire genome of the animal kingdom, why in his book does he resort to solving the problem by an appeal to a multiverse? If one universe alone, a grand universe with an unimaginable number of time and trials, were enough to overcome the improbability, there would be no need to appeal to a multiverse. But Dr. Eugene Koonin has appealed to a multiverse. Why? It's because one grand universe alone, even with an unimaginable number of star systems, doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of mutations producing the coding sequences for a couple of proteins.
Right. And the reason that Koonin brings that up, to my understanding of this, and if anyone in the chat, I'm sure there's many of you in the chat that know better about this than I do, the reason that Koonin is bringing this up is because the basic idea, one is just to follow the basic kind of explanation for lay people, grounded in the modern synthesis way of expressing this information generally to people, is that you can get the rich diversity of life through the kind of slow, steady, natural selection that they describe. And one of the things that's been raised out of this is speculation and skepticism about the vast amount that amount of biodiversity coming from that process. And I think that's where Koonin's coming from. But the solution isn't that that's not how things happen. Right, you wouldn't draw the conclusion. Well, first of all, and then he's trying to say, well, you'd need a multiverse in order to explain all this kind of stuff. I don't think that's what Koonin's. I don't think that's his solution to the actual issue. I think he's appealing to that in order to make the observation. You would need something like what he's presenting mathematically if that explanation held out. But I think also being held up for on offer are other explanations for that amount of diversity, not just the steady evolution, steady mutation kind of explanation, I think.
Yeah, it almost sounds, Jefferson, that might be something else that our friend is misrepresenting.
Right.
Just a smidge.
Yep. And Ethan had wrote, I feel like anyone who debates evolution who isn't a biologist is kind of just wasting time. At this level, they definitely are. And that's a really good point, actually, because if that hasn't been made enough, at this level of things, this really is important, because guys like Koonin and Pigliucci and some of these other guys who are kind of on the outside debating this idea about, like, what is the value of supporting something like the modern synthesis in terms of kind of encapsulating all this stuff and providing it as sort of it's not going to be a single theory, but something a little bit more unified, especially with the hopes of being able to package this up and then summarize it for lay people in order to get them to kind of at least meet them a part of the way. When they're trying to get into this, they're like, okay, there might be a need here to start incorporating new insight, the results of new experiments, new theories, these kinds of things, and put those back into it. At that point, it really is kind of an inside baseball track. And so when somebody like Darth is trying to get into that, smuggle things out of that debate, and then use that to then project onto what is really a grander, much more macro discussion about whether or not evolution is real versus intelligent design, is really stupid. It's a really dumb idea, because at the end, the only thing that he's really appealing to here is like, look, those scientists over there disagree, therefore there's no consensus, therefore there's a chance ID is right after all.
Yeah, and it should also be noted, Ethan. I think I almost 100% agree with you. I would say that there may be some exceptions, like maybe like people in maybe biochemistry and stuff like that. I think essentially I agree with you though. But anyone in the forefront, fuck the forefront. Anyone anyone that should be taken seriously in the field at all isn't going to waste their time with fucking ding dong.
No,
like he's never going to get their ear. And I'll reference something. I don't know. I never have the site. I never have the chat open, so I don't know if Josh is still here. But it makes me think of something that Josh said when we were at the conference back in August. He was referring to something, and the problem is that you would have to, if an actual expert was to hand ding dong his ass in a discussion like this, which he absolutely would, and explain all of the plethora of ways he's wrong about pretty much everything he's saying. The problem is that it would take this expert a couple of years to explain all of the basics so that Ding Dong had a basic understanding, so he could even have the fucking discussion in the first place in an intelligent way, because he would be able to just baffle him with all of these terms and stuff like that. That Ding Dong wouldn't have a fucking clue what he was talking about. And it references back to a conversation again that Josh and I had back in August. And he was saying, he was talking about languages. And the reference was basically, look, I don't have the 2 years it would take to teach you, I think it was to teach you basic Hebrew so that you'll be able to understand what it is you're getting wrong about this, and we can talk about this more intelligently. I'm paraphrasing. And essentially, it would be the same thing in biology, right? It would take someone a buttload of time that they're not going to invest with a moron like this to be able to explain it to him so that they'd be able to understand just how wrong they are.
Yeah. It's one of those situations where, you end up getting into a topic where you're not even capable of realizing how wrong you are about it from the jump. Yeah. And Darth is just like pulling from all sorts of different things and like, hey, you know what? And I know damn well this is how he operates. Like, I saw an explainer video on PragerU and the guy dropped Kunin's name. Yeah. So I know I've got this handled. Like, if Darth Dawkins is watching this, or if he does watch this, if you think Stephen Meyer is doing you any favors, he is not.
Yeah. So the answer to the first question is yes, he is or he will, because he can't get enough. I know he's a big fan of mine. And so, yes, he absolutely is. But it's interesting. I mean, it's like almost what I want to do is just like to have some fun and like create another, I don't have separate accounts. Like, I don't have, what do they call them?
Sock accounts.
Yeah, I don't have that for anything. I am who I am. But I almost want to create one and go in and just like sit with like a textbook on something like, I don't know, like electrical engineering and something, and just start kind of bringing things up just to see if he is so pompous and full of himself that he will just profess knowledge in any fucking field. Right. Somebody wants to talk to him about something. And full disclosure, I know fuck all about electrical engineering. I know as much about electrical engineering as I know about biology, which is this much.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Let's see if there's actually a moment where it's obvious that he gets kicked out. I don't know if it is. Maybe he just like kind of quietly mutes him and moves on to victim number 40.
It says endosymbiosis is another explanation. The multiverse.
You're not understanding. We're talking about the mathematics here. We're not talking about other sub-theories.
Yes, but in order for the mathematics to occur, you have to have things that are in place in order to extrapolate the probability of these things doing what they do. But here's the thing: the theory of evolution isn't an origin of life event, because you seem to have pushed this conversation.
That's not what we're talking about, and you're changing the subject matter, sir. Do you believe it? Do you believe in? Do you know, sir? What you're doing is you're doing a classic bait and switch. We're talking about the origin of the diversity of life. We're not talking about the origin of first life. Okay. So you're baiting and switching. Do you think I'm stupid?
What's wrong with the origin of the
diversity?
We're
not discussing. We're not. Okay. You're just listen. If you don't stop with this bickering bait and switch stuff, I'm going to move on to somebody else.
I'm not bickering.
Do you believe it? Do you believe in Darwinian evolution?
No, because we've gone beyond Darwinian evolution.
Okay. All right. You know what? You're just a moron. Okay. I just love these people who just come in and they just bicker. They don't really say anything substantive. They don't want their
oh, here we go.
Their holy cows being challenged.
They're holy cows. So when you asked Mr. J, do you believe in? So Darth asks him, like, do you
Yeah.
believe in Darwinian evolution? And Jay's response is no, because we've gone past that. That's the response of someone who doesn't want their holy cows being disrupted.
Yeah.
This is just a stupid thing to say. Like,
Well, yeah, but it's interesting. Something that also bears mentioning.
hey, hang on just 1 second.
Yeah.
David Hernando, thank you very much for that super chat. He's a Darth just applied the heckler's veto. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
What's the other one? There's more than one. There's the heckler's one. What else is there?
There's the prevaricator's veto, which
Oh,
is not
pardon
a
me.
thing. Yeah.
Okay. Right. But something I think bears mentioning, right, is, and this is something that again falls under the, thou doth project too much. He talks about this a lot, about the bait and switch. He did it with me when we were on Modern Day Debate, and then later on Praise I Am's channel. When I asked him, which God, because he said, oh, you're a global atheist, now you're baiting and switching. And here's the funny thing, is that again, under the projection thing, because he will talk about, God, 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 and then he will bait and switch to the Christian God.
Mm-hmm.
At a moment's notice, he will flip to, oh, by the way, John 3:16.
Yep.
And
Romans 1. Yep.
Yeah, it's so hysterical because I don't know whether or not, and this is an interesting thought. I don't know whether he genuinely doesn't see that he does it, isn't aware of it, or thinks other people either won't see it or don't care or something like that. But like, I'm not that smart. I can't be the only one that sees that he does this shit. Right?
Oh no, I think most anyone who's entertained by watching the train wreck that he is seeing that and more, and just wondering, like, how dysfunctional a communicator can one person be?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. Just continue to roll the tape and we'll find out.
Big Bad Mama writes, listening to Darth's like watching Gordon Ramsay choose someone out, but Ramsay is actually right and Darth is a fool. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very funny. I've been, and this is something, if I do in fact suffer from that terrible syndrome, Darth Dawkins derangement syndrome, if I do in fact suffer for that, it's because of this. I implore everyone, please do it for Uncle Michael. Call him Ding Dong.
Mm-hmm.
Please. It goes with the DD, right? It goes along with it. Everybody's heard me talk about where he gets that. Right? It was Silver Star, right? A fellow brother in Christ who gave him that nickname. So please address him in that manner. You have my eternal gratitude.
I think I once referred to him as Daddy Dong, trying to merge Daddy and Ding Dong, and I was like, that maybe that shouldn't get started.
Maybe that's his porn. Maybe that's his porn name.
That's his OnlyFans channel. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Hogtie writes, I coined the phrase whiner's veto for situations where a speaker eats up 4 minutes to whine and sob as a means to avoid giving a 10-second answer. Yeah. Darth Dawkins has that down pat.
Yeah. Yeah. But we also have to remember that he's the victim here, right? I mean, he spends hours upon hours trying to relay his unbelievable and vast knowledge about multiple topics, and he gets heckled, he gets trolled. Our hearts should really go out to him because he really is the victim here. Do you sense the sarcasm?
Well, I mean, he's a victim about everything. So, yeah. John Raps, did you say Dildo Dong? I mean, we could start calling him Daddy Dildo, but again, that just seems like an OnlyFans channel. So.
Yeah, those are the porn names, and because we have no idea, because he is, forever the coward, right? Would never show his face. And but you know what? To be honest, this is a little. Sorry, I'm going down a semi-related rabbit trail. Um,
It's
if
the place for it.
if I said the things he has said, I wouldn't show my face either.
Exactly. Benghazi asks, I thought Daddy Dong was your OnlyFans account, Jeff. No, I'm never going to give out mine. Mine's, yeah.
Yeah.
Mine,
I have
mine
the
will
link to that,
forever.
but yeah. But
Yeah.
that's between you and I, Jeff. I don't share that.
I appreciate you keeping that discreet. All right. Anyway, moving on. Let's see here. I think he's kicked my brother at this point, but I'm wondering if he says anything interesting here. Because this guy, I'm wondering if he's going to actually get back to the point. Now he's gone back into improbability of life or something.
How about I take you up on that? Give me 1 billion tries to guess your number. We could do that for the next.
Yeah,
one.
if I have 2 billion, if I have 2 billion numbers and I give you 1 billion trials, you have a 50-50 chance. But what if I have a trillion squared numbers and I give you 1 billion guesses? You don't have a snowball's chance in hell of guessing that number, do you? It doesn't.
Actually, you have a slightly better chance than a snowball's chance in hell.
Yeah.
Matter. It doesn't matter the number of trials. What matters is the number of trials versus the number of the improbability.
Yeah,
and these idiots think, oh well, we just live in a massive universe. All we just need is some planets with water on it. I mean, I can grant to you an unimaginable number of Earth-like planets. Just pick a number. How many do you want? Do you want 1 trillion Earth-like planets? Do you want 1 trillion squared Earth-like planets? Even if you had 1 trillion squared Earth-like planets, okay, over 13.7 billion years, that wouldn't do anything to overcome the improbability of mutations producing even a small amount of genetic code.
Cool. So what are the odds that a being like a god exists?
It's like you reached inside my head and plucked it out. Yeah.
I mean, this really, I mean, it's just complete childishness, right? Like appealing to this thing where it's like, okay, so it's beyond our comprehension to deal with these numbers. It's really, really, really unlikely that any of this that it could happen. It's not impossible. It's just unlikely, right? And then because of all the odds against this being intuitively possible, that seems to be the argument here, right? It's not that it's impossible. It's just that the arguments that we have, it's not really, you can't wrap your mind around how unlikely it is for life to have occurred at all and then to have diversified in all the ways that it currently has. All right. Then add on to that complexity the existence of an all-powerful deity that is an unembodied mind that made this so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's dumb. It's beyond dumb. And so it's funny. It makes me think that, were this God to be real, at least in my mind, it has to be complex, right? Because again, if we think about it, we are complex creatures and we make complex shit. So in my brain, it stands to reason that if there was a God, he would be infinitely more complex than we are to make all this other complex shit, right? And to this, they'll just, they'll just say, divine simplicity. God's actually a really simple being, right? Which has always made me scratch my head a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like we with our finite minds, and all of the stuff we don't know. Like there's tons of I'm sure when it comes to a universe full of stuff, there's still way more stuff we don't know than what we do know. I think there are lots of people with the combined, fields of science and all this other stuff that have got a lot of stuff in our world figured out, at least good portions of it, like evolution. But I'm sure there's still way more. But it's just because, and you said it, like just because we don't understand it doesn't mean that, and it just seems like, like an easy way out. Well, fuck, could have had a V8 moment. Fuck, God did it. right? And I'm reminded of something. I don't remember who I heard say this, but is essentially just paraphrasing that. Saying God did it doesn't explain how God did it. Like that's a it's a useless answer.
Right, but it's one of those problems that, I mean, getting back to what you said before, like the divine simplicity, my favorite aspect of divine simplicity is that it entails a lot of complications, ironically. And the idea of like what you're talking about, like just saying God did it doesn't get into the how. For them, they don't care about the how, right? And I think this is where the dishonesty really comes from, because what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, you naturalists and physicalists and materialists out here are trying to tell me that I came from a monkey and we all came from a fish or some kind of single tree or something, and that the earth is this old. And they start running into like the hillbilly that's just pissed off at this jive talking scientist trying to screw with their sense of reality. And as they go through this, right, they start trying to they'll run to sources like PragerU or the Discovery Institute to start trying to figure out ways to be skeptical about the explanations coming from their quote unquote enemies regarding the how, when the real thing that they're chasing has nothing to do with that. They don't care about the how, they care about the why. They had to be created by a God because they need a purpose. And the only way that they feel they have a purpose is if a personality willed them into existence and gave them something to do in the short amount of time that they're here on Earth, right? And then also there's a promise that their soul is actually eternal. And so there's a possibility of eternal punishment and eternal reward at the end of things, right? They need that narrative.
Yeah.
But that's a narrative about a why. They're looking for teleology. And what they're trying to blow up when they're coming at this kind of stuff is they're trying to poke holes in the how explanations for people who are kind of interested in how things could have done this, right? But there's no real reason why they should be concerned about this, because they're not. The thing that pisses me off about Darth Dawkins talking about this is that he doesn't give a fuck how long. This is a guy, when asked, do babies go to hell if they're aborted? And he's like, I don't know. And if they do, I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
So the how surrounding what God does with the innocent lives of the innocent souls of babies that he definitely believes in does not matter to him one whit. The only thing that matters is that he has a purpose and God gave it to him. He just cares about the what and the who.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting, and you said a lot there, and you hit the nail really right on the head, right? Because it's how. What about you? God did it. Full stop, and it's really interesting. It's like it's like what I remember. Do you remember the dogma debate podcast from a million years ago with David Smalley?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he said one of the really, really smart things that he said once. He said, my ignorance on a topic isn't evidence for your for your hypothesis. Like, just because I can't tell you how something happened doesn't mean you're right about what you say, how it happened. Right. And that's what will be so delicious about getting like a prominent biologist who would never waste their time in a room with him to just say, oh, you want to know how? Bang, 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 bang. Mic drop. That's how. You want to know how it happened? It happened this way.
Yeah.
What do you got now? Yeah. But of course they're not gonna waste their time.
All right, let's see what happens here, and then I'm going to probably wrap this video.
People don't understand the improbability that we're talking about here. They have no idea.
No, I think they probably do understand the improbability of it. It's not an argument that really has. It's really weird, and I'll probably stop sharing it here because he's just going to whine about this, that he's misunderstood and his genius is not respected and appreciated in his time. That you just don't understand. You don't really fathom the improbability of it. Okay, so the solution to this is to tack on something even more improbable, like an unembodied mind with a personality and a will to create all of the stuff in this way. Not only to create it in a particular way, but to create it. Let's say that Darth's right and his narrative works. There's a creator God, created the world, however it works. But for whatever reason, despite the fact that God grants us the ability to make intelligible sense out of the world around us, and we can use quote unquote general revelation as a guide to understanding that it's undeniable that God created this reality for us. But he created our reality in a way that very smart people can study the world around us and reach conclusions about the origins of life and the diverse origins of the diversification of life that are counterintuitive, that are difficult to understand, that are difficult to comprehend, and seem to point in directions that directly defy a kind of common sense, intuitive explanation that a personality made this stuff happen. Why would a personality create a reality as a general revelation, which seems to reveal to people things other than the reality of itself?
He didn't. Federal headship, original sin, Romans 1.
You're right. You're right.
We love our sin. Blah 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 blah. But the one thing that I will say, and I say this without caveat, if the God that Ding Dong believes in is real and his worldview is correct, Jefferson, we're fucked.
Well, yeah, if it's the kind of like the Hittite war god personality that he's got superimposed on his idea of God, yeah, probably. But I don't think that we're the only ones that are fucked. I think a lot of Christians are too.
But you know what's interesting? What would be interesting? And I think I've said this before. If that's the case, I hope Ding Dong and I die at the same time. Because I want to be standing next to him in front of Jesus. And you know, like if I'm given the opportunity to say something, right, or to account for stuff, I'll just motion and say him first.
Actually, what would be even better is that you pop up at the same time, right? And you're on trial together, and whoever it is, Angel, Jesus, Peter, Paul, whatever, looks at you and is like, sin of repentance. And Darth turns and looks at you and points a finger. Ha! I told you, and you wouldn't listen to me. And then they point at him, sin of pride, and you both get hoovered down into hell.
Yeah.
Sorry for laughing about you going to hell with Darth Dawkins. That's a fate worse than hell on its own.
Yeah, that's worse. Like, I think I'm going to be like, can't you just can't you just annihilate me, please?
Annihilation, now that's on the table, right? That's I know some people disagree with it as a concept of an afterlife, but I'm really hoping that it's more of an option.
Yeah, really. It's like weighing the options. Like, can I just check out? Like, can I, what do I got to do? Yeah.
Well, I guess with that, I think we've talked about that. This has been fun because I was glad that you reached out to me like that, because my brother and I had been talking about it. I'd heard him blurbing about it, and I had gone looking for it. I'm like, why does he keep dropping Kunin's name? And I kind of ran across some of the same things that you did, and it was fun to find that one from PragerU just now while we were discussing this, that Stephen Meyer dropped. But yeah, there's such a cottage industry from Christians about doing this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, if you just wind it all the way back to this, like, what are you doing? This notion that you're going to well, we're going to cast so much doubt upon evolution that everybody's just going to come running to church is the weirdest take. Like, why would I do that? Like, if you cast a bunch of doubt on if you make nature and natural processes even more mysterious than they already are, there's a very good chance that I'll just give up on everything and become a shaman and start worshiping rivers and trees.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, the idea that I'm going to go like, oh, you're right, and because you pointed this out, let me just pick out of all the religions, I will pick up the Christian Bible.
Well, see, and that's the interesting point, right? Is because even if you so Ding Dong gets his wish, right? And we're like, oh man, I guess evolution isn't a thing. Well, fuck, I better head to the mosque.
Right? And then he's just like, wait, no, come
wait.
back.
Yeah, like it's just so funny. But I mean, like, yeah, I mean, he's got blinders on. But anyway, one thing that I want to share with everybody is now. So they always talk about, Christians will talk about, having the armor of Christ and shit like that. So now with this new armor on that, Ding Dong is a liar, right? My wish is to, well, see, it's hard. I want to say that I want you guys to all go out and confront him about this shit. But then I'm wishing for you to interact with someone who I categorically refuse to interact with. So that seems hypocritical. But do it anyway. Seek him out and just tell him how much of a fucking liar he is. And maybe have fun with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, I think with that, we will sign off. Michael, as always, thanks for showing up. Thanks for having this discussion. Yeah, this is a lot of fun. I hope you have a good week. I hope things calm down for you. You have anything that you want to blurb, shill, or otherwise advertise before you take off?
I don't think so. I will take the easy way out, and I will copy and paste this link as an episode because Dean and I have been very lazy lately. No, I don't think there's anything so we have the website's active now, the Canadian Atheist.ca. You can go there, check out episodes. There's a lot more work that I have to do. Hey, Maya. There's a lot more work that I have to do to make it more efficient. The YouTube channel, I'm working on it, but I suffer from unbelievable laziness. And so that's a problem. But no, nothing in particular. Just happy to be here chatting with you and getting you some views and attention and a few super chats. So it was good. Keep throwing super chat love at Jefferson for his coffee fund or whatever else.
It does. It keeps me in. Although nowadays I'm on the decaf, because getting older is stupid. But there's a trace amount of caffeine in there. It's enough.
Yeah, it's funny. Like my wife, she has to be careful. She can't have caffeine like after like 4 o'clock at night.
Yeah,
because she's like if I have it's like if she like in if she has any octane after that, and she's like remember those little rubber balls you bounce, you throw down, they bounce like 350 feet in the air.
Yeah,
that's what she is if she has anything high octane after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So
yeah, that I mean I started getting like that about 10 years ago. And then eventually just got to the point where, although it's getting better now, I'm starting to notice that it's not as much of a thing. So I'm waiting to check to see. But I had some medical issues and took some time off from this and from work. And part of it has been wondering how that's going to work. But I really miss I'm more of a tea fan than a coffee fan, but I miss like the fully leaded stuff.
Yeah, I don't know what it says about me because I've been drinking Diet Coke tonight, and it just caffeine has no impact on me whatsoever. I'm not sure what that says about me, because I can have a Diet Coke and then 10 minutes later go to bed. Doesn't have any impact on me at all.
Peter writes, I miss the offline after shows. Any chance of bringing those back? Yeah, there is. Unfortunately not tonight, because I do have kind of an early morning tomorrow, but I do miss those. I was actually thinking about that, and I haven't talked with Peter in quite a while. So, and I miss the Heathen Hangout on Discord. I tried to join in, and somebody brought me in, but I was still out of town, and I was just on my phone, and I always have sound issues. That way the only way I can hear it is if I hold it up to my head like I'm on a regular phone call, and that's just dumb. I can't see what's going on. But Peter, at some point, and actually, Peter, I hate to ask you this, but if you do hear this, I would be interested in trying to. I know this is probably a big lift, but I wouldn't mind if I can find the video where Darth is really going on a tear about the evolution stuff. If there was ever an opportunity to go over this stuff, I wouldn't mind being able to talk with Aaron Ra or have him on here to like debunk this. I don't know if he'd be interested in doing that, because I think he's talked to Darth Dawkins and wrote him off a long time ago. But
I think he has, but yeah, like I consider Aaron a friend too. He's been on the podcast a few times. And so like yeah, I think he's another one of those guys. Like um I'm part of his Facebook group, the Phylogeny Explorer Project.
Mhm.
And like I look into it because I'm curious about it. So much of this stuff goes so far over my head. But he is a guy who's not a biologist, who could tear Ding Dong a new one like that.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, because I'd be happy to help with that. Yeah, I know Aaron is usually pretty busy, but yeah, I think as an opportunity to do a show, I think it'd be. I mean, I would like it as an opportunity just to get educated on it, because this guy throws out so much bullshit at it, and just to have somebody with that background to be able to say, like, no, this is why this is out of context. This is why that doesn't work. Maybe this isn't his field, but Aaron can kind of get into some of that kind of stuff and be like, okay, look at it this way. Check out this for other resources. I think a lot of that is missing on both sides of this, and the fact that, like, if some of these apologists wanted to make the claim that, look, these scientists they're not doing enough to explain this kind of science to people, and they're talking over your head, and then when you don't get it, then they're talking down to you and accusing you of being stupid, right? I'd be willing to agree that there is an absence of really clear, concise, comprehensive communication coming from some science fields, some fields more than others, right? And there can be an absence of real clear communicators coming from those disciplines. But when somebody like a Darth Dawkins comes along and tries to manipulate that lack of comprehensibility, and then does the exact same thing, right? He comes in up over the top with his takes that he's cribbed from a bunch of apologists, and
Yeah.
sort of taken advantage of the fact that there is this confusion, and there are a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings about it. And then it just starts inserting, like, oh, I'll clear this up for you by just letting you know it's all a mess and no one agrees and no one understands it. Get right with Jesus, repent or perish. Like, okay, great. So your solution to the problem was to make it worse in order to get somebody to go to church. Cool. Thumbs
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Which may be, one of the overriding parts of his MO, like just evidently online, right? I remember, like, one of the things, like, reading some of Dawkins stuff was not easy, but I'm forgetting now the title of the book, so forgive me. But Jerry Coyne wrote a really good book on evolution that was a little easier to, I think it was like Why Evolution is True or something like that. It was a little easier to digest for someone who doesn't have a background in the hard sciences. So maybe some people want to check that out.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, I've heard that's a good one as well. Oh, Hogtie, don't worry about it. I said, damn it, right? I was supposed to call Aaron, but got busy and forgot. I suck. No, not a big deal. I think when you and I were having that exchange, Hogtie, I had you were like, hey, do you want to meet him? And I was like, not unless it's for something, like a show or anything, but just to, like, take up his time. I didn't want to disturb him. But Peter's ready. If you have a show and a day and a time in mind, I'll help set that up. The show, I guess the show would basically be it would be a video reaction to some of Darth's evolution stuff. I'd have to find the video that we would end up going over. But then just to ask him if he wanted to kind of help tag team and comment on some of the stuff that gets brought up in a really bad whatever, Darth's kind of PragerU counter or yak apologetics or whatever. As far as like a day and time, anytime that Aaron would happen to have free, I could make time to make that show happen.
It is something that I think could tie in interestingly to his to Aaron's answers in rebutting Genesis apologetics. It could tie, because this was like one of the things they do talk about evolution a little bit in that, and the two kind of goofy people that he have on there from those different videos where he narrates over and stuff like that. They talk about stuff like that all the time, and the whole kind of like, does science really say that, and dumb shit like that. That could be an interesting thing where you could maybe put that together. That could, from a thematic perspective, that could work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Very possibly. I love this, Peter. If I ride a bike every day of the week, does that make me a 7-day cyclist?
Nice. Nice.
And with that, Peter wins the wins the comments with that
Nice.
pun. Very, very good, Peter.
That is that my friend is everything. I can die a happier man having read that comment.
Yep, I can end this thing knowing I can end this stream knowing that we accomplished something because Peter put that in the comment.
Is what's his name again? I forget.
Scary Terry. Are you talking about?
Is he here? Is that why? Is he there?
Yeah. Yahweh testes by fire. Yep, he's in there getting testy in the live chat. So
I'm sure when I go back and look at all of the comments, I'm sure there'll be all of the how he destroyed me and everything else like that. And
yeah, and the replay should be on. Although, you know what? I don't think I did that. I actually have to go in and take care of that. Well, I got some maintenance to do. I don't think I monetized this, and I don't think I changed the ads. So
hey, it's like it's like was talked about with God, right? Like not only do you have to create the content, but you have to supervise the content.
Right. Otherwise, YouTube is a realm of chaos.
It's going to fly off into chaos.
Yeah, you have to impose your will on it. Otherwise, it just turns into a nightmare. Okay. Well, with that, folks, we're going to get out of here. I don't have anything probably coming up, although I probably King Xerxes reached out to me in the comments after the video that I did. So if I do a video in the next couple of days, I'm going to try to reach out to him and see if I can get him to join for.
He came on the podcast maybe 5 or 6 months ago. He's a cool guy too, and like the message I sent you after you posted it, like the whole thirsty for Xerxes.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck, man, you had me at the title. Like that was everything.
Yeah, I don't know where I came up with that, but I think I was looking for images of Xerxes, and I saw that one of, I think that actor is Rodrigo Santoro, and I was just like, okay, I think I got a title. I think
that was from 300, right?
Yeah. It was, yeah.
And I showed my wife that, and she just kind of went like this. She just kind of pulled back like a little bit of a recoil, and as I was just like holding, like just belly laughing, like fuck. Very, very good. Very good.
All right, folks, and with that, please tell her I'm sorry if it caused any offense.
Yeah.
With that, folks, everybody have a great night. Michael, thanks again. Always fun talking with you, and thanks for bringing this up. This was a lot of fun. So,
cheers, all.
All right, and we are going to sign off. I will be back. Hopefully, I will be taking off probably later in the week, next week, but the second half of the week. But hopefully, I will be back for another live stream in the next couple of days. So, and some of this is going to depend too on if Aaron Ra can make free time for me to do a show. Then I will make time for him. So with that, folks, stay safe, be good to each other, all that good stuff, and we will see you all later. I hope everybody has a great night. Take care.
Cheers.